Okay, thank you for coming. Thank you for watching online or whatever. Today, well, I will show you the proof I promised, and eventually we go to the final topic of topology. We'll see, maybe in the last 20 minutes or so. But let me remind you what we have done last time, so Monday, because it's actually quite nice, but it might be a little bit tricky to really get what's going on. So I had this table here, and we were coloring maps, and we were looking for the minimal number of colors that we need for any map, right? Not for a fixed map, but give me your favorite map, and I need at most whatever type of colors. And I had this formula here, which is the Hewitt's formula. And it holds, let me just say that again, it actually also holds for the sphere. It holds for any closed surface except the Klein bottle. So let's forget the Klein bottle. Klein bottle is kind of a little bit weird. But it holds for the sphere, and the only reason I've stated it like this is we can't prove it for the sphere. So for the sphere, the calculation really gives 4 if you just put in polar characteristic 2 here. And that's a correct number, but we can't prove that. Remember, there is the famous 4-color theorem, which is exactly saying that the number is 4, hence the name, 4 colors. And it's just really hard to prove. So today I show you a slightly weakened version of it, the 5-color theorem. So 5 colors suffice, and to prove 4 colors is really hard. But I mentioned the formula, it's here. It's just really great, and you can use it. So if I ask you for some colorings, you can definitely use this formula. Note again that this formula only depends on the Euler characteristic of a surface. In particular, if you have two surfaces with the same Euler characteristic, but they're not homeomorphic because one of them is orientable and one of them isn't, the coloring problem still has the same result. So it's actually a really cool form. Okay, so, well, that's the formula. You don't really need to remember that formula, but remember for all exams and everything, you always have access to the lecture notes, so you can essentially just look it up. And it's really simple. Just put in one number and you get out one number. Just keep in mind that the funny notation, it's called Floor. It's taking just the integer part. So if you get 7.56, then it's just 7. Okay, let me say it again. This is a really cool result, actually. It holds for all surfaces. There's a Klein bottle. Ignore the Klein bottle, but otherwise it holds for all surfaces. Okay, and then essentially what we did, or what I did, is I showed you kind of how it works for surfaces. So the formula spits out 7, and here is the 7 coloring of the torus. Let me put up a 7 coloring of the torus again. So hopefully this picture now makes sense. On the right-hand side, a polygon decomposition. On the left-hand side, the polygon decomposition. On the right-hand side, the torus. Of course, just wrapping up the picture. And as you can see here in the picture, they're just hexagons, and every hexagon touches all the other hexagons. So there are 7 of them, 1 hexagon in the middle, and the others around. It looks a bit strange, but it is a hexagon if you check it. And yeah, so you need 7 colors, and the bound gave us that we need at most 7 colors, so you need precisely 7 colors. Good. For the plane, I showed you this picture. So we need at least 4 colors. And the point is we need at most 4 colors, but we can't prove that. We can prove only a slightly weaker statement, and I will do that in a second. So we can prove the 5-color theorem. So here's a 5 coloring. Do we have 5 colors? Yes, we do. So some light blue, yellow, red, green. Might be another coloring here. And we did that for other things. Here's, again, the hexagon picture. On the projective plane, I gave you an example. I gave you an example on the Klein bottle. And I stated the main theorem here. And let me say it again, we just can't prove it, but it's true. So the coloring number is 4, and I will prove for you. It's a very cute proof, so please stay with me. It will take a while to get us there, but I'm trying to do it slowly, that every map can be colored with 5 colors. So that's what I'm going to prove, and it's actually Hewitt's original proof from quite a while ago, so maybe 100+ years. It's a very, very nice argument. Okay, so I show it for S2 because that's the same as the disk or R2 anyway. And we have seen the argument before, so I will argue on the induction on the number of phases. And essentially the argument will be I collapse the phase, I color the rest, and I blow up my phase again. There will be an additional color that I need for my phase, and I try to make it work. So that part of the argument is already pretty cool. Somewhere about 80% into the proof, we ran into some trouble. It looks like we can't do it, but then there comes a very smart argument that really saves the day. So let's enjoy it together. So we argue by induction on the number of phases. And if the number is really small, remember we want the 5 coloring. So if it's smaller than 5, then sure we don't need more than 5 colors, because in the worst case we can just give every phase its own color. It will be lower than 5. So the induction start is actually quite nice, or pretty simple. And we already had that before, so suppose we have now enough phases, and we want to show that we only need 5 colors, and we had this statement that the average phase degree is smaller than 6. And that's very useful, because this means if the average degree is smaller than 6, we will find a phase with degree smaller than 5, of course. Smaller or equal to 5, because the average degree is. So it could happen that everything has degree 5, but it's not possible to have everything degree 6. And degree was just the number, well, if it's a polygon, it's just, if it's an n-gon, it's just n. So just the number of adjacent edges. Okay, and we play the same game as before. So here's our face. And we collapse it to a point. So it has degree 5, as you can see, it's a pentagon. For some funny numerical reasons, pentagons always play the main role in this game. So it's a pentagon. I collapse it to a point. There you go. And I get a new map with fewer faces, right? I just collapse the face to a point. Very good. So by induction, our new map, as before I call it n, old map is m. So this is m, this is n, is 5 colorable, right? That's what we're trying to prove. So good. So we can give n 5 colors. Okay. But we still need to modify the theorem a little bit, because, well, you can already see it. If I give it just naively 5 colors, let's say I give it blue, green, whatever, light blue, what is it, orange, and, well, we already had blue, but let's make it black. Black is not a very exciting color, but anyway. So there are 5 colors, but F now needs a 6th color, and that's somehow a little bit of, it looks like a problem, right? So it looks like actually like we are stuck here, because in principle we can have this situation with all 5 colors already present, and we need a new color for F, which we don't want, because we want to prove that only 5 colors suffice. But in this picture I can make it neither blue, nor green, nor light blue, nor black, nor orange. So it looks like we are actually in problems. But the main strategy in life is always ignore problems until you can't anymore. So we just get started and see how far we can go. Okay, so let's just get started. Okay, it could happen that we actually find a face which is a square. If there's a square, it's actually pretty simple. We play the same game. Collapse it to a point, but because it's a square, there will be now 4 adjacent regions. So in our inductively given coloring, there are just 4 colors. And if you blow it up again, we just have a 5th free color that we can use. So we blow it up again. The outside coloring comes from induction, and we have a 5th free color. So that's what we wanted to do. Bash, and it's purple. Purple is a very nice color. So we give the face the color purple. And this worked, and that's essentially what we did last time, just with 1 degree higher. So because we always only wanted to color it with 6 colors. With 6 colors, well, let's do it again. Here, we can't run into a problem, because we have only 5 adjacent faces, so there's always a 6th free color. But now we want to do a little bit better. We want to have 5 colors, so this situation is still a bit nagging here. But here, for the square, no problem. I have a 5th free color, I just put it purple, which gives me my coloring of M. Very, very easy idea. Collapse it inductively, you get a coloring, blow it up again, use another color such that everything works out. And you don't need to modify anything at the outside. It's a completely local type of picture. Okay, so that's kind of case 1. Well, case 2 then should be obviously that the degree is 5, which is our pentagon situation. But let's say we are very lucky and our inductive given color only needs actually 4 colors. That could happen, right? So we have no control over the induction, over the coloring given for the map N. It could happen that we only need 4 colors, like in my picture here. What is it? Blue, green, red, and some yellowish color, I guess. So it could happen that we only need 4. And then we are good, because we still have a fifth-free color. And, well, we just fill it in. We have just 4 colors around. We want 5. So we just fill in, hopefully purple. We just fill in purple again. Very, very simple. And the main trick will be to reduce everything to this case. So let's do this case again. It's the same idea. We have a pentagon somewhere. We collapse it to a point. We inductively get a coloring of everything around. The coloring is God-given if you want. We can't modify it. So it could happen that we end up with something that needs only 4 colors here. If it only needs 4 colors, we are good. We blow it up again, have our purple color for free, color our face purple. It's pretty cool so far. So pretty simple argument. Very nice, this collapsing argument, and just some inductively given coloring so that you only need to work locally. Okay, and this is a nagging case. It could happen that we need 5 colors around, actually. And this looks really troublesome. So now we have, what is it, light blue, green, purple, yellowish, and red. They're already around our face. So our trick from before just can't work, right? So purple is already here. So we can't color the middle face purple if we blow it up again. So what can we do? And this is the point where he would really had a really brilliant idea how to do it. So I will show it to you in a lot of colorful pictures, we'll see. All right. So I just labeled the regions A, B, C, D, E, because I will talk about region A, region B, or something. So let's just label them. It doesn't matter how they are labeled, it's just some labeling, such that I can tell you, what is going on here. And I would like to focus on regions A and C. Again, this is just my convention. I want some opposite regions like this. So I could have taken B and E, for example, or D and A, just out of symmetry. I can take any of them. So let's take A and C. Okay. So let's take A and C. And now comes the main trick. So very, very carefully, I will explain what is going on. So around my little local picture, there are some other faces. They have some other colors. We only know that there are 5 colors. So the colors must be green, what is it, light blue, red, yellow, or purple. And I only fix the 2 colors that I've chosen here. So that says green and, red. So there will be some faces of the rest of the map colored green and red, and I'm ignoring every other face. There are more faces, but they have different colors. I'm ignoring them. So I have this bunch of faces that have the same color as A and C. That's somehow lying around the local picture. Could be zillions of them, there could be none of them. Literally anything is possible. But I only focus on 2 colors here, A and C. And now comes the main trick, and it uses the geometry of the plane. So right now we haven't used anything about the geometry of the plane, actually. So the proof can't be really complete at this point. So let's use the geometry of the plane in this setting. Let me say it again. We only focus on the colors green and red now. It's a sub-map given by the green and red colored faces. We did green and red colored countries. Ooh, very complicated. And there are 2 cases. So this is how it could look like. And I start from A, and there will be, the next one will be red, the next one will be green, red, green, because of the coloring. And it could be that the tail from A never reaches C, so it just ends somewhere. And there will be some other faces around that I don't care, but the tail that starts from A could end somewhere without ever touching C. Right? That could happen. Just start from A, there will be a red, the yellow, green. This could be empty again, then it's fine anyway. So that there could be anything from an empty, whatever kind of tail moving around to arbitrary long. But I just need to assume in this case that it doesn't touch C, and you will see in a second why, because the trick is very brilliant now. Okay, so I have this tail going somewhere of my colors, and it doesn't touch C. So what I can do, I can just swap the colors of the tail. Because it doesn't touch C, C will stay the same color. So here, I just swap the colors. The green one will become red, the red one will become green, and so on, all the way down to A, and so on, all the way down to A. So I just swap the colors of the whole tail without touching anything else. And this works because I'm just swapping the colors along this little tail here. And point is, as you can see now in my local picture, I only have 4 colors. So we already know that, actually. So I swap colors along the tail. I don't touch C. So I just make A red in a consistent way. So we have 4 colors. Well, 4 colors means we can just, well, we're back in case C, which means we can, for example, fill in a green in this case. We weren't able to do that before because A was green. So we modified the map along the tail that comes from A. Yeah, does that make some sense? So we are back in this case. Pretty brilliant argument, actually. So we are back in, not in this case. Where's our case here? Oh, no, this was the case. We're back in, come on. In this case, where we are, where is my case? Here it is. We are back in this case where we only had 4 adjacent colors. And we can just fill in the remaining color. That's a pretty cool argument. That's something I wouldn't have come up with, and it's a very brilliant idea. And then now you just play the same game with the second case. So it could happen, well, second case, it could happen that the tail goes all the way around and touches A and C. Right? It could be something like this. It goes all the way around here, something, and touches A and C, which looks like we are in problems, because now we can't swap colors. So if we swap colors, we can, but if we swap colors, A becomes red and C becomes green. So it didn't move anywhere. But there's something, we are in the plane. So now something funny happens. So now, no matter what happens, B and E are not connected by the same trick. Right? So B and E, if A and C are in this case, B and E are in the previous case. So I can swap colors for B and B. Okay, that was probably, let me just do it again. We have 2 cases. So either the tail just only touches one face, then we swap colors along the tail, and the other face is not touched, so we get 1 fewer color in our local situation, and we can fill in our 5th color. That's case A. In case B, well, it goes all the way around. So swapping colors just doesn't get us anywhere, because we still would, well, C would be green, A would be red, but by connectivity of the plane, so here comes the plane, in the plane, this means B and E are not connected in the same way. So B and E, if A and C are in case B, B and E are in case A. So we play the same game for B and E. And out of symmetry, I could have chosen a different A, B, C, E's here and would do the same argument. So we're back in the same case. We already know we can fill in. Let me see whether I'll actually do that. We can fill in, no, I don't. We can fill in an extra color. For example, in this case, I erased light blue, so I could fill in light blue again. Makes some sense? So this is a really nice argument. So let me just do it once more, because it's pretty cool. Come on, too slow. So you follow the tail. In the troublesome situation where it looks like you can't do anything, you follow the tail and swap colors. And you can always do that. That's essentially what I said. For some combination of those faces, I can always do it. So I can always come back to the case with 4 colors and have a 5th free color to fill in into my face. Very brilliant argument, and very different from the argument that we had for the general surfaces. So in the plane, somehow a miracle happens, and you can do better than the bound that we got from Euler characteristic calculations. Yay, it's actually a nice proof. So this completes our 5-color theorem. But you might see already why the 4-color theorem is so tricky, because essentially it is the same proof. You just have more and more and more cases, and the number of cases is just too big to do it by hand anymore. So essentially you can always use those tricks to reduce to a case that you already know, and you fill in the remaining column. Very cool. So let me come back to this. Loads a long time, so let's see. Pictures are too big. Let's go back to the statement. Just repeat it one more time. Okay. So we actually have a 4-coloring, and you are free to use that, but I wanted to show you the proof before the 5 colors because I can't prove the 4-color theorem. Again, 4-color theorem, one of the most prominent, one of the best and most well-known theorems in mathematics. But anyway, I showed you one proof, and I think it's a very cute one. And this is really how proofs should be. There's one brilliant idea. There are actually 2 brilliant ideas, the phase collapsing, but we've seen that before. And then this connection around the plane that you always can find a tail where you can swap the colors. Very good. So collapsing phases, let me click through it again. The easy cases where you still have a free color, and it turns out that you can reduce the hard case, which was this one, to the case, to the easy case, and you always have a free color. And it's very slow. So, the 5-color thing. Very cute proof. This is a really great proof. I hope you like it. Again, there is a 4-color theorem, so you're free to use the 4-color theorem. But the proof here is just cute, and the 4-color theorem proof is just. There are so many cases, if I would start doing it now, I still would do it. It's still the end of the universe. I don't have that much time. I don't know how you feel. So that's just what it is. Cool. So let me summarize what we have seen up to this point, because now we are coming, in the remaining something like 20 minutes, we're coming to the final topic of the course, which in my opinion, of course you should make your own call, but in my opinion is actually the most beautiful one. So the other ones are also nice. So we had seen graphs. I count this as graphs because it's essentially an embedding of a graph, and you count you color the faces. So the coloring problems was also about graphs. And we have seen surfaces. So classification of surfaces. And this third main topic are knots. So if you think about the exam, then there will be 3 topics, essentially: graphs, surfaces, and knots. So I should tell you about knots. And not just because they will appear in the exam, obviously, but also they're really cool. So let's have a look at knots. So up to this point, this kind of ends our discussion about graphs. The theory of graphs is huge, so it's impossible for me to cover it here in this lecture, but I hope you enjoyed it a little bit at least. Okay. A knot is a piece of string with ends tied together. So let me pull up a picture. So we're going into a new topic, right? Swap gears, knots. And this will be the topic until the last lecture, including the last lecture. Okay, let me show you an example of a knot before I give you the definition. So these are knots. You take a string. I'll show you a video in a second. You just knot it somewhere in 3 space, and you put ends together. And as a definition, it's just a continuous embedding into 3 space. So in the background, I have my R3 here, and I just put my string, which is S2, into R3 in some crazy, potentially crazy way. As you can see, the first one is kind of it's called the unknot. It's not very knotty, I guess. So it's a standard embedding of S1, the sphere. Sorry, not the sphere, the circle, as you can see, but it can have way more complicated embeddings. Let me show you so knot theory is really cool. Before I go on show you this, let me just pull up a video for you, such that it's a little bit easier to imagine. So let's see. There we go. So a knot is really, you take a string, you have some string, it's somewhere in 3 space, you knot it in some way, like in topology, you can stretch everything and bend everything as much as you want, and eventually you put the ends together so that this is a circle, right? So that's what we do. Put the nice ends together, and we get, this is a knot. This is one of the pictures from before. And it still is an object of topology, so you can still move it around as much as you want. So it's still the same knot, it moves around. Let it move it a little bit more, and eventually you see already, well, it can take quite different forms. It looks like a pretzel at this point. From this perspective, it again looks like a pretzel. And in topology, we're not allowed to cut it open. Obviously, if you would cut it open, you can undo it. But otherwise, you're free to do any operations on those knots that you want to do. So if I would be very drastic and cut it open, you can undo the knot. You're allowed to do anything else to the knot, but you're not allowed to cut it. As you can see, I can just undo it in this case. Okay, so the video is a little bit longer, but let's cut it here. Well, that's the idea. You study kind of knotty things in space. And if you have shoelaces, for example, there would be a knot, which is, so knots appear in shoelaces, knots appear in real life. So knots, again, a really prominent topic in everything beyond math. It's really amazing. Let me stress that again, if there should be a takeaway message. So if you sit in 5 years and try to remember what I've seen in topology, the exam will be long gone, and it's more about kind of long-term message to take away. And again, these things are really beautiful, but beautiful is maybe just my personal opinion, but they are also extremely applicable, and they just appear everywhere. And the sciences use the technologies from topology that I'm going to show you in this case to study various objects in various parts of the sciences. The most famous one is that actually DNA, so these pictures look exactly like the same like the other ones. DNA actually forms knots. So here's a picture of life if you want. And biologists really use the tools I'm going to show you to study knots, to study DNA, which is really remarkable. So they even give those things the same names. So there will be a knot theorists have a knot that they call granny knot, and they call this DNA actually, apparently. They give it the same name. Very impressive. Again, compare these pictures, which are the real-world pictures of DNA, to the ones which are math pictures that I just showed you here, and they're really just the same type of objects. So in some sense, the flavor here is that the whole complexity of life, of DNA itself, comes for most of its parts how those DNA is actually knotted in 3 space. I'll show you more of those pictures in a second. But you can imagine there's another picture of life. There are knots everywhere in life. This looks more like my life, I guess, than the other one, but there are certainly zillions of applications. So I said again, if there's a takeaway message of topology after the exam is long gone, then that's really beautiful, a relatively new field, and extremely applicable. So one of the most applicable fields of mathematics, and I'm saying this knowing that it needs to compete with something like calculus, okay? So this is really, really an amazing story that I'm trying to tell you. Here are more knots. These are computer-generated knots. So there are lots of programs to generate knots. The first one, hopefully, is familiar by now. That's called the unknot. Say it again. And then you have all the other type of knotty objects. Okay. And one basic question in knot theory is, when is a knot the unknot? Well, I haven't told you, and I will finish with this. So, for example, people here would like to know, what kind of knot do we see? Is it the unknot, or is it a complicated knot? Or eventually what they would like to do is they would like to open a book, or nowadays maybe nobody will open a book anymore, but a web page, and have a list of knots, and they just check whatever my DNA fits under slot 15 or whatever, and then they are very happy. So we kind of need to learn tools to tell whether something that is obviously knotted, like this one here, is actually really knotted. Right now, I haven't told you too much about it. Maybe there's some strange move that you can do to unknot it. Who knows? There is none, of course, but the way to prove it is actually not so clear. Okay, and let me just, in case this isn't clear, if you look at the knots here, so this is the reverse knot. So here it goes over from the left, and the other one goes over from the right. So are these two the same? Again, a question that is, maybe you probably will agree very quickly that these two are not the same, and indeed they aren't. But what about those two, for example? They are just really subtly different. One of them has the reversed crossing order, essentially. Are they the same? Is the fourth one of the others? Right now, we literally can't tell. We are at the same stage as we were with surfaces. We kind of know what a surface is, but we can't really tell them apart. So eventually, we need some methods to attack knotty things. Let me see. Oops. Another video. So here's another knot. Is it the unknot or not? We don't know. But what I will do in a second, well, it just lives somewhere in 3 space. Okay? So it lives in 3 space. Let me just say it. It's not a 3-dimensional object. It's a 1-dimensional object. And what we will do in a second is the following. We consider 2-dimensional pictures of them, which you just get by projecting the knot onto the plane. That's essentially what I showed you before. And we get those pictures on the plane. The only thing we do is we remember which goes over and under. So it's a little bit of a finer information than just the shadow. And we get a 2-dimensional picture of something that actually lives in 3 space. So the original knot is now filled in again. And there will be the little projection of it, which is exactly what I show you here. As you can see, these are not pictures in 3 space, they're projections of the knot. Okay, very good. More knots. And this is the main question. So is the unknot, can we tell whether a knot is the unknot? It's kind of the main question. And these are all unknots, but these are really bad projections of unknots if you want. So the standard projection, but since I can bend it in 3 space and then I put in my light source as before, I might end up with something like this, so this one is still easy. Probably the brain recognizes immediately that that's just the unknot. This one is already a bit more complicated, but still relatively simple. But it can get arbitrarily complicated, which is the whole fun of the game. So this question is really hard in general. Let me show you a picture where at least, my brain can't tell anymore whether this is the unknot or not. This is again a projection of the trivial knot, and it's just ridiculous. So if you can undo it live, congrats. I can't tell anything about it. It could be anything essentially. It looks very complicated, and that's the whole problem of the subject. So we have a relatively simple notion. But since we will study projections, that's what we can do, we'll run into the problem that projections can get very nasty, and eventually, in the same flavor as for surfaces and graphs, we would like to have some algebraic combinatorial tools to just throw at the knot, and then it spits out the number 5, and 5 is not the number for the unknot, so the knot that you have is not the unknot. We would like to do exactly same type of game. And the last thing I would tell you is what is actually the notion of equivalence that we will use here, and I will pull up the 3 main fields that we have seen so far and kind of stress the differences between them. And then as we go along, and tomorrow and for the rest of the lecture, we will study more of those knotty pictures. So can we actually tell whether 2 knots are equal? And maybe more fundamentally, I actually didn't tell you what that means. So essentially, it should mean, because that's how it's built, if I build them out of rope and I have it here in front of me, and if I can bend one into the other, then they are the same. But what does it mean mathematically? And so whatever I'm going to show you is exactly this idea of having a rope and you bend it until it might look differently, but it's still the same knot. You're not allowed to cut, remember, but otherwise bending in any other type of operation is totally fine. Okay, what can we do? Well, we had some notion, so maybe we just throw at it. maybe homeomorphic is a good notion. Well, we had that for surfaces, and it was the correct notion for surfaces. Maybe it's a correct notion here as well. Well, it's being homeomorphic enough. And the problem is, no, because homeomorphism doesn't see the embedding at all. So any knot is homeomorphic to a sphere, because to a circle, that's how it is defined. So all knots are homeomorphic to them, to knots. So if I ask you a question, here's knot A, here's knot B, are they homeomorphic? The answer is always yes, right? So because this is the wrong notion for knots. They're by definition images of S1, so they're all homeomorphic. Again, it shows you how little bit strange homeomorphisms are. So it would identify all of our knots here. Come on, it's slow. All of our knots here, for example, they're all homeomorphic. And the point again is homeomorphism doesn't see the embedding. So it sees the knot as an abstract object living nowhere. And if it is just an abstract object living nowhere, it's just a circle anyway. So this is the wrong notion. The notion isomorphism from graphs doesn't make any sense. We don't have any vertices or edges or anything. So we actually need a new definition. And again, it's just built, the new definition looks a bit scary, but it's really just built mimicking moving ropes in free space. So this is not the right, it's not correct. So don't say not so homeomorphic, that doesn't really make sense. It's not the right equivalence relation for knots. Similarly, homeomorphism is not the correct equivalence relation for graphs. It is built for surfaces. And here's my definition, and it's really just meant to mimic the idea of moving the rope in free space, and we will call it equivalence. I will pull up a table in a second. So knots are equivalent, not homeomorphic. And the point is, it's kind of a really strange definition. I just leave it here. The point is, the definition says I'm moving the space instead of the knot. So I'm not saying it's homeomorphic, but I'm moving the space such that the movement of the space identifies the one knot at time 0 and one knot at time 1. So that's all I'm writing here. I have a function, and at 0 it spits out points on x, and at 1 it spits out points on L. Okay, it's called ambient isotopy. I just leave it here, but it's just built to mimic the bending. The point is, it's just a mathematical definition, so you will never see it again. We don't really use it, but it's kind of a technical tool in the background. So this is a good example of that sometimes intuitive definitions are not so easy to make rigorous mathematically. So this is a kind of a little bit of a scary definition, but essentially what it does is it just says knots are equivalent if you can build them out of rope and put them from one to the other. That's all this is saying. And it's harder to write down than you would guess it is. Of course, the slides are online if you really want to read it, but you will never see this definition again, and you don't need to remember it. The point you need to remember is that not homeomorphism is a wrong notion, and what we do is we just pull the knots around exactly as in my little video here. So let me just move a little bit to here, so I can do all these operations. That's how it's built. And it will give the same knotty object. Let me just end here with my last slide. So we have seen 3 types of objects. We haven't really seen much about knots. But these are the 3 main objects we see in topology. We have graphs, and the correct notion for graphs of equivalence was isomorphism of graphs. It's different than homeomorphism for surfaces, and it's different than equivalence of knots. They should never be compared directly. They're different objects. They kind of want to do the same. They're all part of topology, but in the end, they're different objects. We should never compare them. It's like comparing apples and oranges. We just shouldn't in some sense. So the correct notion for graphs is isomorphism. That was just a bijection on the vertices such that the connectivity of the edges stays the same. It doesn't make any sense for surfaces. Surfaces don't have any edges and vertices at all. It doesn't make any sense for knots. For surfaces, the correct definition was this homeomorphism, which doesn't take any embedding into account. So it's a wrong notion for knots, because knots live through their embedding. They're interesting because they somehow sit strangely in free space. And the correct notion for knots, let me pull it up again, is either you want to read the abstract definition, or what it really mimics, and it's built to just have the movement. Anything you can literally do if you would build it. Not this one. This one is the only one that is not allowed, but anything else that I do before here, I guess, anything you can do with it being a rope in free space. Okay. Next week we continue with knots. Essentially, the story is the same. We would like to study Euler characteristic type tools on knots, but they're not the same. Just keep that in mind. So let me just say that this is a one-dimensional object. It just has edges, which is the highest dimension here. A vertex has dimension 0. This is also a one-dimensional object, but of a different flavor. And this is a two-dimensional object. So it's a surface. In particular, it's hollow, so it's not three-dimensional, right? It's hollow in between. So we don't compare them. They have different types of equivalences. You also wouldn't compare a vector space to a group or something like that. It's the same here. They're really different beasts. So if I ask a question like, how is A related to B, and A is from class graphs, and B is from class surfaces, they're not homeomorphic or anything. There must be a more subtle relation between them. Anyway, that's it for today. So thank you very much, and we will enjoy more knots as we go along.